one thing I really hope and pray for, and this is a perfect segue into the next segment, is no injuries. I don't want any fucking nagging injuries to keep anyone out of these games. I don't want Marcus Smart to be out with foot soreness. I don't want Robert Williams to be out with soreness. I don't want Jason Tatum to be out with shoulder soreness. And I'm not putting the blame on the athlete because the athlete does not control whether they get hurt or not. You have freak injuries, which do happen, and they're very unfortunate, like what happened with Gary Payton. You can't plan for that. But this season in particular has just seemed like there's been and more injuries that should not have taken place. Like more nagging injuries. Tyler Hero was missing in action for 2.5 of the final 3 games against the Celtics. Like with groin soreness, I think it was. And this is something that the NBA is going to have to reckon with. I think that currently, outside of how the NBA is officiated, I think the biggest issue that the league is dealing with is the schedule. I don't think the 82 game schedule is no longer sustainable. I think that the NBA needs to seriously consider shortening it to 78 games at first, maybe down to 75. I wouldn't go any fewer than 75. Maybe I would go 72, but I feel like 72 would give the NBA more of a reason to add like an extended in-season tournament, which is going to add like 5 or 6 games anyway, and then you're kind of just back at square one because very few guys play all 82 games. It's just too taxing of a schedule. And it's been exacerbated because of what's gone on the last couple of years. This season, we go back to a full 82 game schedule. Of course, we go back to an 82 game schedule on the heels of an NBA Finals that went into July. The finals extended into July, giving players a very short offseason. Automatically, an automatic red flag. And then, of course, this comes on the heels of them trying to sandwich these 72 games into a shortened schedule from December to May. So, guys are playing every other night for a large amount of the season. The NBA, as although they've tried to eliminate back-to-backs, they're still prevalent. Teams are still playing like 3 games in 5 nights, 4 games in 7 nights, and it's just adding more and more fatigue to these guys. And then you combine that with the fact that they did this to get back on schedule because COVID went ahead and mucked up the schedule, which forced the NBA into another weird scenario where they're having the finals again off schedule and then starting the season up again around Christmas time. It's been a mess these last couple of seasons. And if you're going to put these athletes under this strenuous schedule and you're not going to allow them to take any, banned substances, like more so recovery type substances, which is what NBA or endurance athletes in particular would be taking. Like guys in the NBA are not going to go on trend. They're not going to take like anabolic steroids. They're going to take something that allows them to recovery faster because massage therapy, sauna treatments, ice baths can only take you so far. And I understand that everything will be back to normal after this. But the NBA now has to reconcile with the fact that we've already had the schedule fucked up one time already because of, a global pandemic. What's going to happen when the next one rolls around? They're not giving themselves any wiggle room. And then when that comes around, you already have these guys whose bodies are beat up, they're fucking drained, like they're guys load manage because the load that they're receiving. God damn it, I fucking hate talking about. I hate load management so much. Guys are resting and managing their loads because the load that Adam Silver is giving them is too much. There are too many games. These guys are too athletic. The league is too good. Like these guys are beating up their bodies more and more to not fucking get left behind. So you take the season, you shorten it to 75 games. If you want to, ease into it, you go from 82 to 80 and then to 78 and then to 75, just to allow guys to adapt, to allow the league to adapt as well, I'm all for that. Like, I don't think that it needs to be a fucking seismic shift. But what really did it for me was in these playoffs. And it clicked for me when I'm talking to my friends about hockey playoffs and how the Rangers last night, Sunday night, or Monday night, pardon me, the Rangers just now advanced to the conference finals, despite the fact that the hockey playoffs started before the NBA playoffs. And right away, I know that in the playoffs, having guys play every other night is unsustainable. You can't do it anymore. It is just a slap in the face to the athlete. It's a slap in the face to the fan because you're not able to watch Marcus Smart be healthy. You're not watching a healthy Robert Williams. You're not watching a healthy Tyler Hero. You're not watching a healthy Jimmy Butler. And I'm gonna minimize the stream screen for this just so I can show you guys. Like the playoffs started April 17th. 1 day off, 2 days off, 1 day off, 1 day off. The only time you get extra days off is if you finish the series before the seventh game, which I think is that is also a tremendous slap in the face. I think that regardless of when the series concludes, each team should get minimum 2 days off. And then if you finish the series early, you'll get 2 extra days off. It's like when Miami beats Atlanta, right? That series ended on April 26th, which means that they got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 full days off before Miami took on Philly in the second in conference semifinals. Now imagine if instead of starting on the second, it started on the fourth because Philadelphia went the distance with Toronto, or they went 6 games with Toronto. Their game finished on April 26th. So they're still getting 2 days off. Or no, their final game ended on April 28th, which means they got 1, 2, 3 days off. Okay, perfect. Now, if you push that series back, you tack on 5 days for Philly and then 7 days for Miami. This every other day schedule in the postseason is simply not sustainable. Another thing you can do, and I don't know if this is already happening, but when teams have to travel, like I'm on Toronto. Actually, you know, we're gonna go back to Philly and or not Philly, Miami and Boston because I think that was when it clicked. So you have Miami, Boston traveling back and forth every couple of days. You could sneak an extra day of rest into those trips. So after game 2, like game 2 for Miami and Boston was on May 19th, and then game 3 was on May 21st. You could slide that back another day to give them, a legitimate recovery day after travel. Because I don't care if you're traveling on a charter flight, I don't care if you're accustomed to it. Traveling is still a lot. Traveling from Miami to Boston is a fucking pain in the ass. And then traveling from Boston to Miami is equally as big of a pain in the ass. And then after game 4 in Boston, which was on May 23rd, they fly back to Miami, and that game doesn't start until the 26th. And then you can have the 1 day in between the end of the series. I think that's fine. But if you want to give them another day, I'm not opposed to it. I just think that I think it's too taxing for the players at this point because the league does it for the finals. I was looking at the schedule today. Game 1, June 2nd. Game 2, June 5th. So you have 2 days off there. You then again have 2 days off between game 2 and game 3. Game 3 to game 4 is 1 day off, but then game 4 to game 5 is 2 days off. And then game 5 to game 6 is 2 days off again. Of course, that's if it's necessary. And then game 6 to game 7 is another 2 days off. Now, why does the NBA have this 2 day rest period for these teams? Because they're traveling across the fucking country. They're traveling across 3 time zones. They're dealing with jet lag after playing a fucking NBA Finals game. When guys like Tatum and Smart and Steph and Clay, these guys are going to play 40, 42, 45 minutes potentially. I don't understand why that same schedule cannot be implemented for the entirety of the playoffs. And then I truly believe that if you do this, you will get better basketball. I mean, there's really no way to quantify that. Although the NBA Finals do seem to be more entertaining than every other game, and it's probably because the players are well rested. It could also be because these guys are, these are a handful of the 10, 15 best players in the NBA, like two super talented teams. That of course contributes to it as well. But all these extra games that Adam Silver is trying to squeeze into the schedule, the play-in tournament, which I think is fucking stupid. He's talking about like an in-season tournament. If you're gonna put an in-season tournament and not reduce the number of total games, I think that Adam Silver is making a disastrous mistake. The play-in, it's a little bit less because, listen, it's a game or two, and in most instances, these teams are not making deep runs into the postseason. So it's like that extra game is not going to impact them that much. But even then, I think the play in should be heavily modified so that way it is just the eighth and the ninth seeds playing for the eighth seed. And even then, they'll only do that if they're within like a game and a half of one another. It's a one game win and you're in. Kind of like I think how the NBA or the MLB does their wild card games. Yeah, I know there's like whatever the fucking what is it? Baseball's 163rd game. Okay, so baseball's 163rd game is essentially a tiebreaker. I don't really know how this works. I just know that it's a one game win and you're in type deal. And listen, something that the NBA can learn from. I did have another point. I just totally fucking it totally evaded me. I think another thing the NBA can consider doing to ease this to ease the scheduling issues is no longer having a best of seven in the first round. I don't think it's necessary anymore. I'm gonna try to find the playoffs, like the playoffs overview. There was no series in the first round that went 7 games. All of them were done. All of them except well, half of them went 6 games. Okay, never went 7. You shorten it to 5 games. You can then justify additional rest days. And then if you still want to keep the finals in that early to mid June period, which I think is what the NBA wants to do, you can shorten the first round, allocate those additional rest days, and then still start the finals in June. Like, I don't think that there's anything happening in June that the NBA is like afraid of taking away from that's taking away from their show. Like that's the whole reason teams do the schedules how they do because they don't really want to take anything away from the other league, right? There's a reason the NBA doesn't play on Super Bowl Sunday. It's because nobody would fucking watch. That's why. There's a reason that the the World Series starts before the start of the NBA season. Like there isn't much of a conflict of interest there. There's nothing happening in June. I mean, there's summer baseball, which is fine, but don't forget, the baseball games take place in the early to mid afternoon. And if you're a basketball fan and a baseball fan, of course, I can't say this with any certainty, but I think that you'd be more compelled to watch an NBA Finals game as opposed to a random fucking game in June, unless like Jacob DeGrom is starting, unless like, Clayton Kershaw is starting or somebody like that, or if there's a chance that a record's broken or whatever. But those are effectively my thoughts on this year's playoffs.